Okay.
Welcome, Wargamers. This is Doug with 2+ Stuff, and this is WYR Forging episode 7? Sure? Okay. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about all the cool Daughters of Cain stuff that was kind of revealed in piecemeal last week by GW. Do games played, hobby, basically all the podcast stuff that I just don't do because I don't have a podcast yet. And putting that all into a video format for you. What I'm going to do is turn the camera down so you can watch me hobby. And if you have things that you're working on, this is my personal invitation to go ahead and grab your paintbrushes and models, drag them out, and let's paint along together and just do hobby talk. Okay, here we are. I always start with hobby progress just so you know what you're looking at as I'm doing it. And I have here 6 flamers of Tzeentch. And so we're going to get to cracking on those. I'm going to have them be really light blue, and then kind of do the GW wash thing where you just put layer of wash and then build it stronger towards the bottom so it gets progressively darker. So we'll, yeah, we'll start those. And that should be, yeah, that should probably take me the entire time. Oh, I won't boast to do anything else for right now. So I'm getting set up here. Games played. Actually, let's stick on high progress for a second. So I actually don't have anything else besides these guys. I finished the Marauders that were in the last video. I put them. Someone asked me why I had them on square bases, and the reason is I bought them used from a guy who played them in Warhammer Fantasy Battles. Excuse me. And you know, back then, honestly, I think he had them on the wrong size even for that. But whatever. Maybe he was using them as warriors or something. And I figured why take them off before I do all the work. So the Shattered Minion bases that I had are really easy to prepare when they're still on the sprue. Just dry brush the crap out of them, go back and do some details. And so, yeah, that's pretty much what I did, ultimately. So I got them all painted, and then the last thing I did was just take a big X-Acto knife and very quickly and sharply popped them off the base. You know, no damage, nothing like that. So I'd say that it was pretty much successful. So that's why if someone watched that last video was like, why is he doing square bases? That is why. They're not on squares. They're on 25 rounds right now. And they came out pretty well. The original 20 that I got and did on the channel way in the beginning, they were done. They were like halfway done by the guy who owned them, and he did a really tanned kind of skin tone, like Cadian flesh tone, and then kind of darkened down a little bit. I mean, they look like they had sun, basically. And the ones that I did, I prefer my Chaos people to be very pale and kind of gaunt. So I just did like a really quick, like Rakarth flesh, some washes, and built that color back up. No extreme highlights, because Marauders die too quickly to earn extreme highlights, but yeah, I just kind of did those kind of really quick details. So they don't really work together, I don't think, aesthetically in one unit, but they do have different weapon options. Like 20 guys have axes, 20 guys have flails. So whenever I buy another box of them, I'll just choose my, chosen weapon, which I usually go with flails. They tend to be my go-to. So yeah, and that was about it. So the reason I'm moving to demons is because originally this was supposed to be an army that had about 1k of Slaves to Darkness, and then 1k of whatever demonic, side I was working on that time. The whole point of the army is that I can, play as Maggotkin, I can play as Disciples of Tzeentch, play as Khorne. And so I just decided to start with Tzeentch, and as I mentioned, I think I mentioned in the last episode, I bought a really large lot of Tzeentch stuff off a friend of the show, Brent. I messed that up bad. Brent, he was a great guy who, he was looking for a way to kind of pay off some of the, what are they called? Kradron Overlords that he had just bought, and I was like, oh, yeah, I'll take those. And so, yeah, I was able to get hooked up with some Tzeentchy demon goodness. He was playing them before the Disciples of Tzeentch book came out, and so it wasn't really built towards, like, he wasn't building like a chain show specifically or anything like that. So it's kind of a random assortment. but it's a really, really good mix. And so after the games, which I'll get into here in a second, I realized that I need some unit diversity. And we'll get to why that is in just a second. And actually, our Q&A is going to really dive into that, because I kind of previewed some of the questions, and they're asking a lot about Slaves to Darkness, which is interesting, because I feel like no one ever does. So, yeah. As far as games played goes, I played 2 games. Let me get my handy-dandy Warhammer Age of Sigmar game thingamajigger. The book. Tell you what. That corner, hold that. There we go. Okay. First game. So I played 2 games this weekend, both of them last night. I took pictures of them for the Patreon page. Phone started to die towards the end of the first one, so the second one with the Minotaurs, I didn't get very many pictures of, which is a shame because that army is so stinking beautiful. So I brought my standard of Disciples of Tzeentch, but with all Slaves to Darkness, which is 30 Marauders, 2 units of 10 Warriors, 5 Chaos Knights, a Chaos Sorcerer on a Mana Core, and the Harbinger, because we're playing Malign Bort and stuff lately. And, okay, so let's go into the first game. I played Ironjaws, Jack's Ironjaws, which was a lot of fun. I never get to play Ironjaws. I hear a lot about them, like online, but never actually get to actually try them. So, that was very interesting. They're a very hardy army. They're just kind of a meat mountain. And let's see here. I'm going to try and speed up my battle reports, because I kind of went blow by blow last time and eat up a lot of the hour that I have available. So we'll try to hammer through that. His force was basically everything but the Maw Crusher. So he had a unit of Brutes, a unit of Ardboys. He had the War Chanter and the Spellcaster one. I can't remember what he's called. Weird Knob Shaman. Mega Boss and the Riders. Can't remember their name either right now. Gorguntas. Is that them? I think it's called Gorguntas. Someone will correct me. And yeah, he basically spread his deployment pretty wide. I mean, he just kind of put them in a single file line, and they just kind of came at me. We made a little custom scenario, basically like trying to fight for a center point in the board. And that one, that was a strong loss on my part. So basically what happened was I tried to do another long bomb charge, which worked so well, which if you go listen to the last week's episode, I did a long bomb charge with 40 Marauders and just kicked in the teeth of the Tzeentch demon army that I'm now painting. Because I engaged them way faster than he wanted. And yeah, try that again. However, Jack had one of those portents rules that forces me to reroll a charge, and since I used Destiny dice to do the long bomb, I couldn't recreate it with dice, so I just threw away 2 6s of Destiny die. That was bad. That was real bad. But, you know, it's the fun part of Malign Bort, to see all the wacky stuff that you can make happen that you wouldn't normally. So that was cool. That was actually really cool. And then, yeah, so really what happened was he spread his army out across the table, and I did the same. The difference is we have very different kinds of armies, and so I think his units are all a little more independent, whereas mine really should have been bricked up towards the center to get bonuses from the bosses. Like my sorcerer and stuff, with that mystic shield and all that junk. And so yeah, he also scored a really nice long charge. Pretty much went past my front line and put his brute straight into my general, the Chaos Sorcerer and Mana Core, and ate him for breakfast. And what else? Yeah, I mean, that was basically how the game went. I think on the end of turn 3, I was like, yeah, you want to call it? And you're like, yeah. I do have some pictures I'll be showing up here as I'm talking about this. And I asked him at the end, like, you know, what could I have done better? Because I try to always I want to improve. I really do. I'm not terribly great at this game, like from the gameplay perspective. But I want to get better, especially because I'm using like Zine stuff, which has a lot more options than just Slaves to Darkness. So I want to explore those options and get good. And he kind of like stared at the table for a while. I was just like, "You just rolled bad," and I did. My Destiny dice. I put a picture on the Patreon account. And that was I think there was like 4 2s and like 3 1s or something like that. Which, you know, if I was rocking demons, it'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's D6 pink horrors. Yeah, that's awesome." And then, but I'm doing Slave to Darkness, so it's like, well, you know, if you kill 13 Marauders, having a 1 for a battle shock still doesn't quite help. I mean, it was a fun game. Jack's always fun to play against. He's a really great guy. I just got my teeth kicked in. And then the second game I played was against Minotaurs from my good friend Mark, who is also a friend of the channel. And both these guys, if you want to see how good they are at this game, they both have a channel. Well, they both work on a channel. It's Mark's, but called Rerolling Ones. And I feature it on the main page of my channel as the battle reports. I don't have the resources, like the physical space, to do battle reports. But they do, and they are top-notch when it comes to editing and stuff like that. So go check them out if you want to meet my gaming crew and see kind of how we do things over here. Mark has a beautifully painted Minotaurs army. Or I guess, were they Warherd now? But they are all Minotaurs in the army. Along with one of the giant... what's it called? Like it's not a Gorgon. Whatever the big, colossal, four-armed, like, Minotaur-looking thing is. I can't remember for the life of me. But it's absolutely stunning. He entered it into Armies on Parade, and it was just breathtakingly beautiful. We played a open war deck scenario on that one, where there was a center objective, and then you got to place an objective inside your deployment zone. And it's the one where you get a point for capturing it, and if you capture for 2 turns in a row, you get 2 points or 3 points for it. And him, knowing that he needed to keep his army kind of like huddled up, put his deployed objective right near the center one, which is strange because of the deployment map that we had, which is the one where, like, if this is the board, the 4x6, where one of the sides has like a triangle going the width of it, and the other 2 have the corners. So functionally, he split my army in half, and then was able to put his marker right beside the center objective that the game called for. And he was like, "Oh yeah, you know, I feel kind of bad for being cheeky." And I was like, "No, don't worry about it. Like, because objectives are captured by having more models. I certainly have more models. I have way more wounds than the Minotaur army. Like, you know, it'll round out in the end." And it did, to be fair. I never felt like I didn't have a chance. Let's see here. All these little details here. Okay. I'm going to do something cool for the flames on the back and all that stuff. That's why I'm leaving them white. And so that game, how'd that one go? Basically, Mark talks about how his bull guys, they have a 5-up save, so they die really, really easily. Okay, and that is true. And he loses a lot of games with them. He just doesn't lose those games to me, because whenever I play them, he eats my army for breakfast, because he gets these like crazy rolls, and they have like a -2 rend and like either 2 or 3 damage. I mean, they're just like mowing through dudes. And that's the thing, is they're really great at taking out like your basic line infantry. And in this particular chaos list, that's what the bulk of the army is just kind of basic line dudes. I just have a lot of them, and my goal is to flood the table and my enemy and drown you in small attacks, like 1,000 cuts, rather than quality ones. And so, basically, I just gave him everything he wanted to do, and he was able to pretty handily wipe my army from the table. It wasn't like 100% smooth. There were some hiccups in terms of he didn't do as much damage on some critical things. Like I had predicted, the sheer number of models that I had controlling of the objectives, like once I flooded his side, I kept getting those objectives even though he was sitting on them because I had more models, and it counted as me having them. And so I think the final score, he won, but it was it would have been like 10-8 because he just got those objectives back on the last turn that we played. Yeah, because there was 2 rounds where I definitely had more models than him. So you get 2 objectives because his were next to each other. The first round, and there were 6 total. The second turn you have them in a row. So yeah, that sounds about right. So I mean, it was a close game. It was just the math of his list, the types of units and things like that were a very hard counter for what I brought. And so I looked ahead at some of the while we were forging questions, and a lot of them are about Slaves to Darkness. So I'm going to kind of save my thoughts on how to improve the army until then. There are some things as I'm looking at the options available to me, some different directions to go. I'm not someone who's sold on a Slaves to Darkness thing. Like it's a theme, and it's a theme that has a purpose. Like it's specifically supposed to be 1,000 points so that I can ally in other things that are frankly more effective and synergize well with it. So yeah, let's dive into some of those. So those are my games played. Had a great time with both of those gentlemen. They're great opponents. Lots of fun. Beautiful tables. Basically everything you could want in a gaming group. And we're still loving the Malign Portent system. Both games were using that. The first game it came up more than the second one. But I am thoroughly enjoying it. I would love it if the Portents mechanic was a permanent thing. And the reason I say that is because Mark's army, the Minotaurs, they don't have wizards, they don't have a lot of shooting, they have nothing like that. And so what the Portents thing does is it strictly adds to them, it adds options to them. And I felt the same way. I think in one video I talked about, like, you know, greenskins. If you love just playing greenskins, you can still do stuff, you know, in the end of the Portents rules. And so I think that kind of stuff is really, really legit. I think it's a way of giving playability to everything without making seemingly anything overpowered. I haven't heard of anyone really staunchly complaining about, you know, overblown powers and things that are just not fair. So if you've had a bad experience with it, I'm curious to hear, but I have generally heard good things, and that is awesome for introducing any new mechanic. That's all you want, right? You just want people to say it's fun. So yeah, that about wraps that up. Okay, so games played. We're going to go over to Q&A now. You can get some my water out of my way. So, we actually have several questions. I'm going to kind of breeze through these, answer them quickly. I just don't want to be too long-winded. I have some cool topics I want to talk about. At the beginning of the show, like when I started it, episode 1, I wanted to do like, do 2 or 3 real topics to get a conversation going. And then I just kind of got bogged down with questions and games played. Okay, first question is from Bond. He says, hey, I love the content. Thank you. If there was a current faction that could get relaunched with the love new factions are getting, what faction would you like to see get new love? For sure, it would be Moonclan Grots. Moonclan Grots, because I want them to be more than just squigs. Like, I want reasons to take Grots upon Grots upon Grots, because that's what I like. When I was trying to decide between my next army and the one that I was going to stick with in the long run, it became between Slaves to Darkness and Moonclan Grots. And I just thought Slaves to Darkness had more options. Like the demon that I'm painting right now, I can ally in. So that'd definitely be my answer. Would you do... Sorry, Ignatius asks, would you do some Warhammer 40k lore similar to how you do SIgmar lore series? Please and thank you. I definitely considered it. And I think one of my Patreon levels, I'm going to start doing that just to include more people. If I do, it will be a separate channel. I know I have some 40k content on here right now. Frankly, I'm going to level with you guys. The start collecting box reviews don't do well in terms of just not even like, it's not about monetization. It's not about that. It's about the fact that 40K is at a point right now where they are putting out material for it so rapidly because they relaunched it that I feel like I can't make a video without it being invalid 2 weeks later. And so when I started to do those start collecting box reviews, it's because I thought they were going to kind of go the route of SIgmar, which is like, okay, here's your Grand Alliance books, and they kind of just eased off the gas a smidge when they did that, right? Because give everyone time to acclimate, I suppose you could say. And they did not do that for 40K. Partially, I think it's because they know it's their cash cow. That's fine. But it makes it very hard to produce content for them that is not going to be invalid very, very quickly. And so when things kind of settle down, and I'm sure they will this year, I think they've already announced that the next few codexes are going to be spread out a smidge more, or at least that's how it looks. I'd like to do that. But like I said, I do want to do a channel dedicated to it because, and I'll cross-reference them all the time. It's more just because, and I'm going to be honest with you, there are some people who play 40K who hate Age of Sigmar. And I see hate all the time on groups, on other YouTubers, and all kind of stuff like that. And so for the purposes of keeping this community happy, I think it would behoove me to just make a second channel and then invite people to come over if they want to, and if they don't, they'll know that when they stick with that channel, they'll just get what they want. And I think that is a fair way to do things. Okay, so answer your question? Yeah, sometime in the future. Kyle asks in all caps, so I'm assuming you're screaming, looking to start an AOS army with Slaves to Darkness or Grand Alliance of Death army as a narrative player, which would you pick and why? Okay. It depends on what you value. If you value options, Slaves to Darkness, because like I'm doing right here, I am mostly Slaves to Darkness, but I chose to be Disciples of Tzeentch as well, which you can do. You can, I mean, because you can use Slaves to Darkness models and just call them all Tzeentch, and then boom, they're good to go. So there's a lot of options potential here. However, if you like a more unified book, which means probably more people will have more tactics for you and stuff like that, definitely go with Death. And the reason I say is, with their new release of content and stuff like that, Death is in a really good position right now, and you couldn't have said that for the longest time. And so, you know, if you're new to the game, what's really helpful is surfing online for tutorials and stuff like that. And so you're going to be hard-pressed to find them for Slaves to Darkness. I'm going to level with you. There's just not a lot of content out there for them. Most of the content, like if you were to look up Disciples of Tzeentch like this, okay, you'd find a lot of stuff about demons and the Arcanites or whatever, but no one really takes the time to talk about, like, let's talk about just Slaves to Darkness. There's a couple videos on YouTube, and that's largely it. So, you know, I think in terms of like having more resources for a new player to get started, probably Death. But the thing about Death is, once you're in it, right? Like, you can play different legions, but if you ever get tired of those models, they're only ever Death. Whereas the reason I'm doing this is because I have hobby ADD, and I tend to hop around armies a lot. And so it gives me an outlet. If I ever just like, I want to paint something different, I can grab some demons and use them still. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for. No one can tell you what you like or what you value. But those are my thoughts. Just think about what you're looking for in an army, and look at what's basically offered by those things. Okay, next one is Simon. Simon asks, okay, first off, I just want to thank you for the great work and great vids. Thank you. I just got back into Warhammer 40K like a year ago, but at some point I got real bored. I saw one of your vids and thought, and I think it was a start collecting on Skeleton Horde one. So he went down to his local shop in Sweden and picked one up about 2 weeks ago. And he found his spark for AOS. He played High Elves for 16 years. Oh, sorry, played High Elves 16 years ago. I also played High Elves a while ago. I do enjoy your videos when I build and paint. So my question is a little lore and army building. I'm a diehard fan of Neferata. Good choice. What heroes should I go? I'm assuming I mean at the moment. I have 40. What heroes should I go with? I have 40 skeletons, 10 black knights, and a cavern throne. 20 ghouls, 3 spirit hosts, and Neferata. So, if you're asking me what heroes would kind of complement that, a white king would definitely complement that big block of skeleton warriors, and that's going to be your money maker right there of the stuff you listed. Black knights, I hear they're good now. Like they have far more utility. They were kind of struggling before this book came out. Not because they're bad. They just weren't special. You know what I mean? Like everything in the army beforehand had to be like, why would I take that if I could just take 30 more skeletons, right? That kind of thing. Let's see. Yeah, that'd be my suggestion. If you're looking for what heroes should I go? Okay, so I'm thinking we have Neferata. That's a great start. White Kings and Vampires are great. Also, I think a Necromancer would buff most things there. They have this cool spell where it lets a unit pile in and attack twice. So you get a monstrous level of attacks and damage from your skeleton warriors, and then they get to do it twice. It's just gross. So that would be my suggestion. Thank you so much for your question, Simon. Number 5. With the coming Daughters of Cain, the release of the Dark Oath War Queen, and more female models, what are your thoughts on female representation in AOS? Do you think we are moving away from sexist stuff, or things pretty much the same? As usual, keep up the great content. I watch every single video. Oh, thank you. And this is from Quentin. I'm sorry, I should have read that first. Sometimes SurveyMonkey kind of puts the name in question in weird orders. What do I think? That's a big topic. On the whole, kind of surmise, I think we're moving to a really, really great and healthy place. I think representation is probably the most important aspect of introducing different people groups into a hobby or activity. And that's why we celebrate the first, right? The first Major League African-American baseball player. You know what I mean? Like all those things. Even, you know, the first female baseball team or whatever. Like all the kind of things that we include people in, we celebrate those things, and that's really awesome to hear. As far as the models, I think they've been killing it ever since the, what's her name? The 40K, the Saint. Saint Celestine. Killing it since her, because that was one of the first models we saw in a long time that was clearly feminine. It's clearly a very feminine model, but is not over-sexualized, and it's not ridiculous. I mean, they're wearing, you know, the plates on the chest and things like that. Nah, it's fine, whatever. It's war. But it didn't seem as over the top as like the old, what is she? There's an old female sorcerer's model, like, you know, wearing just basically 2 leather straps to cover her nipples, and that's basically all she's wearing to war. And it's like, no, nobody fights like that. You know, she looked decked out and awesome, and so that was definitely, I think, the turning point. And then Alariel knocked it out of the park with just like, here's this super robust model, like just in terms of like the plate that it sits on, just looking big, bold, and just awesome. So I just love that one as well. I think that was a great slam dunk for them. I think we're definitely moving to a better place. I know on the 40K side, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and YouTube videos, and they are very upset about the idea of Games Workshop changing some of the lore to include women. And when I say lore, like, I mean like changing some of the history of characters or the process of making Space Marines to include women in there a little more. And that's kind of a different topic. I mean, that's more... I think the folks who are really, really, truly upset about that, they don't see the big picture of like, but you get more people to play with. If people are included, then more people show up, right? I mean, if women are included, women are more, you know, prone to playing because they feel like they're being represented. They're a part of that universe. They can fall in love with it just like we do. And so I think that's very important. But it's a matter of what's important to you. If the continuity of this universe that you've invested your mind in is more important than changing it to invite new people into it, you're going to be upset. And there's no right or wrong. I mean, I'm not decrying anything for that. It's very important to some people. I get messages all the time about how important Old World was and how angry they are about Age of Sigmar. That's fine. You know, I mean, that is their life. But for me personally, I think adding more women, but doing it in a smart way, rather than like, this character is a woman just because we needed more women, makes sense. So, for example, like, I always gush about the book Nagash, Undying King. The simple fact of the matter was, it had a woman. Sorry, it had 2 women as 2 of the main characters. It was Neferata and the human. I forgot her name already. Gosh, who was the actual main character of the book was a female human, and like, she was there just being cool and BA, but it was never like about her being a woman. You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't the selling point. It was like, she's just also awesome. And I like that kind of stuff, where it's like, you know, these universes are vast. There's a vast array of characters of all sexes, creeds, you know, kind of religious temperament and all that kind of stuff like that, just like in real life, and representing them, but doing it in such a way to as not, I don't know, make an example of them. Like, again, it's the same thing with that kind of stuff in our real world, right? Why did Ghostbusters, the new one, flop? Like, well, because the whole point of the movie was like, oh, but it's Ghostbusters, but it's girls. I don't care if it's girls or boys. Make a good movie. And they didn't make a good movie, and because it seems as though doing stuff just because girl power is just not enough, and I agree with that. All I have to say, I think Great Games Workshop's doing a great job. Just absolutely killing it when it comes to inclusion, I think, is the word that I think is the most important. I think that needs to be the theme. Not basing things around it, not company driving, not direction changing. Just include people. And I think they're doing a great job with that. I wish the Dark Oath War Queen had better rules. Might actually see her more, but hey, can't win them all. Next question. There's no name here for this one. It says, how often do you go to your local game store? What do you usually do when you're there? Like, the minimum obviously being just buying what you need and then leaving. What would you do differently if you were to open my own store? Okay, so just asking about how I do. How often do I go to my local game store? Let's think about that. Probably like once every 3 weeks. I've kind of reached that hobby point where I have most of the paints I already need. I usually just go for kind of hobby supplies. I trade models a lot. Like, I'll paint stuff for people and then trade them for unpainted stuff. That's kind of how I got my Slaves to Darkness. And then I bought these used. So in terms of buying models, I actually don't buy a ton anymore. The last big purchase I made was when the Malign Important stuff came out. I bought the book, the cards, my battle journal thing, and something else. Oh, the gauge. So that kind of stuff. Yeah, that really is actually about it. So minimum purchase, I always go in for some kind of hobby tool or something like that. I don't have a lot of time to just kind of like loaf around at a hobby store. So when I'm there, it usually is that kind of thing, in and out, grab what I need and get out. So, which is unfortunate. I wish I had more time, but that's how life treats me right now. I assume you're asking, like, just to get a feel of like how I support my local hobby stores. And I do that by, for a while, before I had this job, which is a little bit more demanding, I would do AOS demos and things like that for free, not ask anything of the owners, except for just a space, you know. Hey, let me do this. Can you throw some product on the shelf in case they want to buy something? You know, just a starter box or something like that. And so I had some success there, and it was just a good mutual relationship. I got new people to play with, played some games, and they got customers and sales. So I try to support them as much as possible. I'm going to reach out to one of them here pretty soon to say, like, hey, would you mind, like, helping me out with the battle tome every once in a while, just in case. The Patreon thing doesn't pan out all the time. You know, just trying to get help, because and then promoting them on the channel. It's just hard because, like, the place that I typically buy stuff is Games Workshop. And I want to give a huge shout out to the store owner in our local area, who's Matt, up in Linwood, GW, in the greater Seattle area. Super cool guy. Really like him. Really appreciate him and his passion for his hobby. But being part of a corporation means he can't, do all the things that you'd want to do, like, you can't pimp out a Games Workshop store without their permission, that kind of stuff. So, within the confines of what he's allowed to do, he is the greatest. So that probably gives you the answer there. And that's typically where I buy things from, just because I support the company, and that's what it is. That's what it comes down to. I support him, and I support Games Workshop directly. Okay. If you have more questions like that, like asking about how I hobby and basically how I spend my resources, you're more than welcome to ask. That's a really great question. Another one from Kyle. Sorry, maybe not another one. Okay, this is Kyle. So I am building a Slaves to Darkness army. What would be the best way to set them up, in your opinion, for narrative play with a few tournaments here or there? Well, this is the question I was talking about earlier when I said I had some thoughts about Slaves to Darkness. So my list right now, my 1K, is a bunch of Marauders to flood the table. People get pinned down by warriors because they're harder to remove. And then I have knights coming in on a flank. And what else? Chaos Sorcerer Lord. Don't build Chaos Sorcerer Lord in the Mana Core. It's the worst option, but I just think he looks so good. Here's the thing. That army, Slaves to Darkness, is really great at something. And that is high model count and many, many little attacks. Okay? And that is a legitimate strategy. It's basically the strategy that I've been using for them, right? At a 1K list, I take like well over 100 wounds, and I just flood the table, and I ask my opponent a question: can you handle this many wounds? If not, I win. If you can, I lose. And that's exactly what happened at game night. Both the armies that I played, the Minotaurs eat Marauders for breakfast, and then Jack with the Ironjaws, my dude wall ran straight into them and didn't have an answer for the orcs because they were tougher. And so things crumbled apart really, really quickly. So I think Slaves to Darkness are at an interesting point. The YouTube channel Doom and Darkness, whenever that guy talks about Slaves to Darkness, he has some profanity for them because he doesn't like them. And I agree with his sentiment that they are not, even with the allegiance abilities that came in the GHB, they're not a standalone army. I really don't think they are. I think by virtue of what the models do, they even struggle to be pure Slaves to Darkness as something else. Like my pure Slaves to Darkness Tzeentch army, where I get to use Destiny dice and all cool stuff, it still struggles because it's still a one-trick pony. At the end of the day, my trick is, can you handle this many dudes? And so what I would suggest is looking at something to kind of augment them. I'm doing Flamers because I have yet to play shooting as a phase of the game with this army in particular, just because nobody has a gun. Like the Marauder Cav have an 8-inch javelin they can throw. It's like, whoa, hold on to your hat. You know what I mean? So I'm building these guys to kind of plug a hole in that army that is very, very painful right now in terms of play. And so if you're talking about building something, I would say pick a theme, have them devote themselves to a god, walk the path to glory with that god. And the beautiful thing about Slaves to Darkness is you can change gods and still have most of your models be legit, because a Marauder for Maggotkin is just like a Marauder for Tzeentch. And yeah, and that's really, I guess, the crux of it. My point being, use their advantage in terms of like having lots of dudes. I'm still going to have my Marauder Swarm, Chaos Warriors, stuff like that, and that's going to pin down the enemy so that the other half of the equation, the one that I'm missing now, Flamers and heroes who can do spells, stuff like that with the Tzeentch lore, can come up behind them and wreck house. Because that's, again, the other half of the equation. So keep that in mind. I think they're part of a whole. I don't, at this point, see them as being a whole army. One day I'd love if they came out with a Dark Oath book that gave the War Queen and the Chieftain some really cool stuff, and buffed them out the nose, and you know, with like prayers or something, you know, just those little things you can add to a War Scroll and army, and do some cool stuff there. But for right now, I'm struggling. So my advice to you, so because I don't want to leave you without any kind of advice and only hopelessness, is pick a god and choose something that complements that strength of having high model count well. So if you go with, like, say, Tzeentch, obviously shooting and spellcasting. If you go with, say, Khorne, having some strong beefy units like Wrathmongers and Skull Reapers can really pay dividends. If you go with, like, if you are okay with dipping into demons, Bloodletters, Plague Bearers who are more tanky on objectives, things like that. So that is my advice to you. So find something that complements that strength. Next one, Will Cooper. Do you think Wanderers will ever get some love, like a start collecting box for Battle Tome? Also, how do you think the Legions of Night will do with the new Legions of Nagash Battle Tome, specifically in the Nightfall pack? I'm not super familiar. Oh, sorry. Thank you for what you do in advance, and good luck with your Slaves to Darkness. Thank you. I'm not super familiar with the Nightfall pack. I've heard people talking about it. I'm not quite sure what it does. As far, I can probably just give my opinion on the Wanderers one, which is, I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I had a lot of excitement for when some of these new battle tomes came out and they kind of started re-lumping factions together. Like, all Nurgle stuff is like 3 different kinds, or 4 different armies because of the Pestilence, right? And I wanted more of that. I did. And so, to that regard, I wish they would, like, lump in Wanderers with something else and just make it, you know, just include it in part of an existing faction to expand it. That way, people who like that can actually use stuff, and I think that would be fantastic. But then they came out with some other stuff, and that doesn't seem to be kind of the direction they're going anymore, so that's a bummer. So, will they? Probably eventually. I don't know what their vision for them is yet. I think that's going to be the ticket, really, is how they fit in Age of Sigmar, but they have to decide that first before they can release a book about it. As far as Manfred goes, I hear he's kind of like the coolest of the Mortarchs in terms of rules. I hear him and Arcan because of the spell lores and things like that. So I would love that. I mean, those are... Nephra is my favorite of them all, but in terms of, like, narrative stuff, but yeah. Sorry, I don't know much to say about that. I'm actually I haven't delved into, like, the formations and stuff like that for Legions of Nagash quite yet. Steve Bond, who I assume is the Bond from the first question, asked, can you please explain how summoning for Flesh Eater Courts is supposed to work? If I was to bring a Crypt Gas Courtier, how am I supposed to use his Men-at-Arms ability? Men-at-Arms. I think that's the one where you add models to a unit, if I'm not mistaken. Please tell me if I'm wrong. It's different than summoning because you're adding models to an existing unit, therefore you're not paying for a new unit. If that makes sense. It is rather confusing. But basically how it goes is the rules for summoning say, if you add a new model to the battlefield, you pay the points for it. But they're not. They're not adding a new anything to the table, and so they kind of skirt around that requirement. And so they get to beef up existing units, which is pretty cool. So, to put it simply, you pick an existing unit near them. Here, actually, on my phone. Let's see. I want to get that right, because I think I know what you're asking about. Oh, here he is. I was like, for a split second, I was like, holy crap, did they get rid of the Crypt Gas Courtier? Yeah, so it's pretty self-explanatory. You're not summoning a new unit, you're just adding stuff to existing stuff. So when it says, add 1 model to a unit of Crypt Ghouls from your army within 10 inches. In matched play, you can't go over the size of your starting force. So if you were to take a big blob of like 30 Crypt Ghouls, You would plop them on the board, and as they're taking losses, then you're using the Man-at-Arms ability to then replenish those losses, so the unit stays strong throughout the game. Because you're not summoning a new unit, you're not spending points for it, which is a huge, huge bonus. And actually makes them pretty savage. I did a video many moons ago that I don't agree with anymore. Back when Flesh Eater Courts came out, I made a video that said, like, oh, why I think they're the strongest unit. And there's still, I think, a lot of game that people don't give them credit for, or don't try with them. But the simple fact of the matter is, recursion, which is bringing models back and having them keep fighting, has proven in other game systems like War Machine and horrors like that to be incredible. And the reason is simply that it bends math to your favor when you both bring 2,000 points, but you know that you're going to generate another 200 points equivalency of crypt ghouls across your existing units, like by resurrecting dead ones. Man, it swings math pretty hardcore. Now the thing is that Flesh Eater Courts wasn't given mega, mortal rune pumping out rules, and so they kind of die before you can do that. So that is how that works. Joe asks, can you estimate a timeline of this year for what you think Games Workshop will release for Age of Sigmar? Honestly, no. I tend to stay away from rumor engines, and the reason is they make me anxious, to be perfectly honest with you. I get overly excited for what's coming out, and so I just kind of get anxious. So, yeah, I typically don't. Someone said something about Sea Elves. They're coming out. Daughters of Cain's coming out next week, and that's about all I know. Tarnus asks, let's see here. Hi, in my local store, hardly anyone plays AOS. I'm usually there Saturdays for an opponent, open to close when I've reserved a table, but no one turns up to play. Not even the guy who works in the store plays it. What can I do to find more people to play with? Well, I don't know where you're from. I know that, like, different areas in the world do different things differently. Like in the UK, they have like gaming clubs. So if you're from there, I would say check that out. Try to find something in your area. I think a good place to start is the Age of Sigmar fans Facebook group is very active, and I know the guy who is the lead admin for that. And he's a super cool guy. What else? Yeah, I mean that's kind of the main thing, is just trying to find people online and making it clear that you're there to play games. And maybe instead of saying like, hey, if anyone wants to come play Age of Sigmar, come, show up, and maybe change your kind of pitch to I'm doing demos, and just bring demo armies. That way people can not feel like they have to already know stuff before they come up, and that might be a good way to do that. Okay. Alejandro asks, lore of elves before Daughters of Cain comes out. I don't have any. It doesn't exist. This is why Daughters of Cain is a big deal. There's no information really right now, so I can't help you there. I'm sorry. 13. Eric, the Devout of Plague Father. Let's see here. So his question is, okay, let me get this right. Life, decay, and death are all part of the natural cycle intertwined, but each of the gods involved seem to want to decouple their aspects from the cycle, or stop the cycle. What do you think might happen if one of them were to succeed? For example, if Nagash caused decay and new life to stop, there would eventually be no more death. Do you think these gods realize their interconnectedness? Do you think that any of them would ever be able to succeed in their goals? Or is there some intrinsic aspect to each of them prevents one god from stopping the other? Okay, so this actually comes up quite a bit in 40k as well, where the end game that we've been given for the Chaos Gods makes no sense. And basically what it is in 40k, it's they want to come into the mortal realm and kill everything, but if you kill everything, well, they're psychic creatures. If you kill everything that's living, you're not getting any more psychic energy, and so they get weaker. Well, that doesn't make any sense. And in Age of Sigmar, when you talk about life, decay, and death, you're really talking about Alariel, Nurgle, and Nagash. And it's hard to talk about kind of, because here's the thing, they're not just solely dedicated to their part of the cycle. They also have personal ambitions as well. Like, Nagash wants to rule everything. It's not about things being dead, it's just about ruling them. He rules over living people as well. With Alariel, all we know is that when she walks in the area, things spring to life magically. But there's very few times where we've seen her go out of her way to, like, regenerate something for the sake of pure life. So their motivations, I think, are more kind of vague than just being focused on their aspect of the death life cycle, which I agree with. I mean, it's true. If they were all about their specific part of the cycle, then there is a logical conundrum. However, their personalities and traits that are separate from their powers, but in addition to, for example, like Nagash, you don't have to be a tool and be the Lord of Death. He just happens to be the Lord of Death, who is also a tool. When it comes to, like, dominating people's wills and things like that. So, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is it doesn't necessarily force them to be all about life, all about decay, all about death. So, yeah, I think they did it purposefully to make that kind of vague, because this way no one gets typecast. You know, no one gets stuck being very static. They can have personal motivations for stuff like that and have more complex characters. Okay, 14. Philip Wilkinson asks, "Hi, Doug. I was wondering what colors you were going to paint the War Queen and Lord of Change. I'm painting the Queen at the moment, and then painting Lord of Change soon." Thank you for the great vids. Well, thank you, Philip. For the War Queen, I'm going to do the exact same scheme as the studio, except she's going to have a white cape, because all of my Slaves to Darkness have white as their highlight color, like the capes and all that stuff. And as for the Lord of Change, I'm still debating on that one. I'm not sure what to do. He's going to have white to be his, like, tabard thing. But as far as, like, his actual main color, blue's cool. And sometimes I'm like, but maybe I should just make him red for really no reason whatsoever. You ever get those thoughts where you're like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you think about that? And then I'm like, yeah, red Lord of Change would be sexy. But I don't know. I haven't decided on that one yet. He's still, I got him from my deal with Brent, half built. And so I haven't even touched him because I want to know what my vision for him is before I actually do it. And the last question is from Silvek. "Hi, I'm new to AOS, and it's your channel's fault that I got into it. I'm sorry. Question: do you think that armies like Dispossessed, Free People, and so on will eventually go away?" Short answer: no. I don't think so. Those armies, Greenskins for Destruction is another one. Yeah, it's basically those ones. They kind of... They're really great. It's just like Slaves to Darkness, right? They're great for just having around so you can fill a gap with allies if you need to. I don't think they're going to go away. I think the time of models going away has passed. We haven't seen anything been taken away in quite a while. Yeah, that's basically all I have to say about that. I think that time in the game's past is over with. As far as do I think that they're going to get a whole lot of attention is a different question, and I also am curious about that. Like, I don't see a Slaves to Darkness book coming out. I want a Free People's book so stinking badly, but I don't see any, like, real solid concrete rumors of it or anything like that, so that's a bummer, because that would be a really cool book. So yeah, no, I don't think they're going away. I also think they're not going to get a whole lot of love for a while, because they work so great as filler armies for Grand Alliance stuff. I think they'd be hard pressed to kind of put them in a mold, if you will. And that is it for listener questions. Thank you guys so much. If you have a question, go down to the show notes below and leave it there, and I'll get to it on the next episode. I usually record on Sundays. Just at random times. Otherwise, I would do a live stream if I had a set time. Which I might be doing eventually, to be honest with you. But for right now, the flexibility is important. Malign important. Okay. Things that I wanted to talk about. I have 2 topics for today. And that is the Daughters of Cain hype train. All aboard that everyone has been on. Very excited myself for Daughters of Cain stuff coming out. I am not going to buy the army. The reason being, I have big, bold plans for the channel, and with the support of my patrons, I'm going to get a computer next, so that trumps my expenditures on models and stuff like that. And also because I was really hoping they were going to adjust the price on Daughters of Cain, the Witch Elves or whatever, and they did not, and that hurts. It hurts my soul and my wallet. I told Mark, the gentleman who I played a game with many, many moons ago, if I could do any army, I would do Daughters of Cain. This is like a year and a half ago. But I didn't because they were just so expensive, and man, my golly, they still are. So I know that they came out with that like Allies box that has a set of 10 witches and Blood Rack Shrine, which now with all the different units that it makes, it's actually like 4 or 5 units in that stinking box, which is a fantastic value. It really is, and I can't dismiss that. But I tend to fall in love with the basic troop unit of an army, and they themselves are still just out of my price range. Too many. I would not want to buy that many Witch Elves at that price point. So, not for me. But the other things we've seen, as I put up in the Patreon thing, I'm so excited for Harpies. For some reason, when we're I remember learning about kind of Greek mythology and stuff like you do at school when you're younger, and the idea of Harpies has always like fascinated me. Just that kind of like winged creature, not necessarily angels, because they're not angels per se, but they're just this being that's really, really cool. And so the flying, I don't even know what they call them, versions of the witches stand out as like, those are freaking dope looking. I like that. So that's super cool. I hope they do more stuff like that. My love for Harpies almost made me get a Bloodbound army just so I could play Valkyria the Bloody. Which, like I said, the whole point of Slaves to Darkness is that I have versatility. Whenever I do switch over to Khorne, I will definitely be picking her up, because that's just irresistible. I think she's so cool. Forgive my messiness with the washes here. Okay. In case you're wondering, I put on a, what's this called? Meridius Blue from P3. And then wash with Nun Oil, and now I'm washing with Druchii Violet on the ends to kind of give a blending effect. And then I'm going to do white on all the like the flame quote-unquote stuff, and then just do a wash of Beltane Green, which makes a really, really pretty effect on the white. Makes a very ghostly effect. And I want the flames of their attacks to be different than fire. Like I want it to be like warp flamey. So that's the goal there. So yeah, as far as Daughters of Cain go, we saw some cool preview stuff come out this last week from Games Workshop. Just kind of giving us a sense of what's going on with them, and not so much lore stuff, which is kind of what I'm interested in. So like I said, I used to play High Elves back in the day. I was more excited because people were referencing like, oh, Tyrion made the Sea Elves. I was like, oh, Tyrion, man, that guy's a baller. So I'm really excited about hearing about him and Malarian. Marathi is one of my favorite characters from the old world. And here's the thing, you can tell somebody who's read the books that involve Marathi because she's always everyone's favorite. If you've never read it, The Sundering is a great series from back in the day. And they actually re-released it, I think, with this release coming out. Because it was so good. And basically this chronicles the civil war the Civil War that created the High Elves and the Dark Elves, like, as separate factions. The thing that drew the line and split them in twain. And it's just an incredible story. Marathi plays a titular role in that. Does her darndest to destroy empires. She is a devout worshiper of Slanesh and brings all kinds of hell and mischief to the island of Ulthbon, where the elves were, and it's just so good stuff. So much good. So yeah, I'm excited for her. That's kind of the thing. The people who I've seen reviews come out from, like Guerrilla Miniature Gaming and those kinds of things, they've commented on the fact that this is like the army of Marathi, not necessarily Daughters of Cain, meaning all the stuff, even on a gameplay perspective, all it does is buff and help Marathi. And she is a self-centered enough figure that I absolutely believe that is the case. Like, they would take that concept and make it rules. And I think that is cool. Because even in the Everchosen book, I didn't feel like everything was necessarily about Archaon. Because he's not vain in the same way. I think he is vain, but not in the same way as Marathi. And so his is like, oh, these are the mortal realms, the armies of the Everchosen, but not just, including but not limited to Archaon. Which is cool. But with the Marathi, the Daughters of Cain book coming out, I think it is all about Marathi and her ascension into godhood and all that kind of stuff. And I've said it before, and I'm more interested in this now more than ever, since like we kind of get tidbits of her lore. I'm very interested because she wants to be a god, like level person. And we know it's possible because the Great Horned Rat became a god. But, like, what's the difference in her kind of path to godhood versus, say, Archaon's, who's been, like, kicking teeth in for hundreds of years and just rocking the scene? You know what I mean? Like, I want a comparison between those two, because she needs to seem pretty badass to be anything near someone who can be like, I deserve to be a god, when Archaon's out there just wrecking face, punching Sigmar in the nose. So they need to fill her up a little bit with lore, make her seem scary, and make her seem like someone who can actually be a contender for that position, not just whining about it. Like, I wish I was a god. Well, we all wish we were a god. Yeah, so that's my thoughts. The patrons have voted, and so Daughters of Cain is going to be our next week of series, where we talk about the lore of a faction for a week. And so we're going to be diving into all those topics that I just talked about that sound interesting. So, yeah, stay tuned for that. The second topic was one that I touched on. I just want to talk about army building-ish. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a competitive person by any stretch. But I'm learning some things through experiences about how I play this game. And that is that I tend to stick to one phase of the game at a time. By that I mean, like I was talking about earlier, where I have a lot of dudes doing a lot of work, but I don't have any shooting, which is why I'm building these guys. And I don't... yeah, I don't know. I want to play in more phases of the game is what it really comes down to. And right now I just do charges and I do combat, but other people do combat better than Slaves to Darkness, and that is the issue I had last night. Both those armies did combat better than me. So yeah, and so I'm adding the Flamers to do some shooting. They have some pretty quality shooting attacks. I'm actually surprised I didn't know about that earlier. So yeah, pretty good at shooting. I'm also going to finish up. I have 20 horrors started, and I'm going to invest in. I'm going to paint up my Gaunt Summoner and get him on the table, because he should help out significantly when it comes to spells and junk. I guess both of those units would. I always forget that horrors are wizards and therefore get to have a spell from the spell lore, and that is pretty amazing when I think about it. You know, even if I just throw away like a defensive spell and like they do the Mystic Bolt or Mystic Shield, Arcane Bolt kind of stuff, that's still better than wasting that on a hero, Lord Change or something. Like making him do that kind of low level stuff. He should be casting cool stuff, hard stuff. So, yeah, I mean, so kind of going over the units that I have at my disposal for building an army. The zine slot that I got had 3 burning chariots, who are also really good at shooting, because it's basically an exalted flamer on the chariot. 6 flamers, 9 screamers, gaunt summoner. No, 2 gaunt summoners. One's on foot, one's on a disc. That's cool. Lord of Change, they haven't built yet. Oh, a bunch of heralds. I have a herald on a chariot. I have a herald on foot. 30 pink horrors and a couple of random blues and brimstones. I think from the Silver Tower set, if I'm not mistaken. So that is my Zinchian aspect of these guys. And I'm happy with them. I think they fill in the void that I am missing, which is I gotta get some shooting out there. I need to be more effective and diligent about using spells, because right now I'm a Zinch army that doesn't do magic, and that's... I have a Chaos Sorcerer Lord and a Mana Core, who is the most unimpressive sorcerer out there. He has a spell that, like, it's a 7 to cast, but you add the amount, you count up how much like your casting value was, and that's how many dice you roll. So say you roll 8. You get the spell off, and then you roll 8 die, and every roll of a 5 is a mortal wound to your enemy, and every roll of a 6 is D3. So it has a lot of potential to do amazing damage, but it's far from guaranteed because of that 7 to cast. Now, but the thing is, his main limiting factor is he can only cast 1 spell a turn, and that is criminal for a Zinch army. To only be allowed to cast 1 spell. Like, if you're a Zinch army and you're casting 1 spell per turn, like, it needs to be like the last round of the game, because everything else is dead. And that's just kind of how I've been playing him, because I was like, oh, I love the way he looks and stuff like that, and I still do, and I'm still going to include him. But I want to get better at the game, and I mean that sincerely. I'm not good at this game when it comes to... I get overwhelmed with options, really, is what it is, of what to do for my turn. And so I need to get better at that. I need to like memorize this is the spells I have available. Here, you know, when I build a list, I need to build it with the mindset of like, you know, these are the tools I have to use to accomplish this mission and kind of stuff like that, rather than like, I built 40 Marauders. I could probably build 40 more. You know what I mean? Instead of like, I don't need Marauders. What I need is a gun. What I need is magic. What I need is, you know, that kind of stuff. What I need is synergy. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I've been at. I'm curious to see if anyone else has kind of those realizations where it's like, the army list I have right now just isn't working. I've heard Ironjaws players say that because they don't have access to as many options as some other factions, according to them. Like I said, the last night was the first time I ever played Ironjaws, so I don't know. I can't speak from experience on that one. So, yeah, as far as list building goes, I'm going to keep coming back to my chaos stuff, because really what this is kind of like a video log of me getting better, hopefully. Hopefully it's me getting a little better. Yeah, I just need to fill in things that I'm missing. And that's the thing, like, at the end of the day, yesterday, I had a great time playing with friends. I had great friends I play with, and I love them to death. But I didn't feel like my army played enough of the game. I was only there for charges and hits, and then once my stuff started to die, Marauders are great, but man, when things fall apart, they fall apart real quick. If you have some bad rolls in the beginning of the game like I did, they're done because they lose steam really, really quickly. And like I said, I asked Jack, like, what can I do better? And he's like, you gotta roll better, man. And that's kind of what it came down to. They should be scary. In the game against Brent last week that I talked about, where I was picking these exact demons out of my teeth, you know, because I just murder faced them so good. You know, it's because the Marauders got in there and did some work. But my God, if they don't, they're just they're turds out there. So I'm just wrapping up these guys here. My plan, in case you're curious, if you're watching and not just painting, I'm going to use the nickel oxide stuff and just do a wash of that on the white that you see that I'm painting. That way you'll have that kind of like light turquoisey warp flame type thing going on. And then just go back and do some highlights to kind of pick out some of the flesh stuff. I'm going to paint the, I'm going to put another wash on the tentacles to make them a different color. And make them stand out a little bit, because he has these cool tentacles going down the backside of him. It's pretty cool. Okay. Okay, friends. How long have I been ranting for? Let me see. Hour 15? That's not too bad. Got through a lot of questions and 2 games played on that. That's really good. Cool. I'll go ahead and pause here for the night, just to give... I can't do much more because these guys need to dry first. But, hey, I want to say a huge thank you. This is my first WYR reforging since I launched the Patreon. And I just want to call out and say, hey, thank you guys so much for your support. I'm going to begin, as I promised, saving up for a computer. Which, right now, you know, WYR reforgings is an hour to shoot, almost. It's about an hour, usually. But it takes like 3 times as long to process the video, edit it, and then upload it to YouTube because it's such a big file. So anyway, there is that. So a new computer will go a long way to making that a more feasible thing. You guys are incredible. My patrons are awesome. If you want to join us in the community, I do a lot of things there, including raffling off any battle tomes that I review. And just saying thank you for your support. And yeah, ask questions, have dialogue. Talk to me personally. It's really good stuff. Until next time, friends, I will see you on the next While You're Reforging. You stay classy and happy wargaming.